The invisible force shaping your tomorrow is not the loud thoughts you chase or the goals you try to force into existence. It's subtler, quieter, yet infinitely more powerful. It is the emotional state you inhabit day after day, moment by moment. Your emotional baseline is the foundation of your reality, the unseen lens through which every opportunity, every encounter, every experience is filtered. Most of us go through life thinking that our actions alone create outcomes, that effort and strategy are the keys to success. But if your emotions are consistently low, anxious, or conflicted, no amount of action will manifest the reality you desire. This is the hidden law of emotional creation. What you feel now is shaping everything you will experience tomorrow. Imagine for a moment that your emotions are like radio frequencies. Each day you broadcast a signal. Some signals are chaotic, inconsistent, or heavy with fear, doubt, and resistance. Others are calm, expansive, and resonant with alignment and possibility. The universe, in its infinite intelligence, responds not to your words or even your thoughts. It responds to the emotional frequency you maintain as your baseline. It does not negotiate. It does not debate. It mirrors. If you are constantly vibrating in fear, your experiences will reflect uncertainty and limitation. If you consistently vibrate in confidence, joy, and trust, you will begin to notice doors opening, synchronicities aligning, and opportunities appearing that were invisible before. Most people are unaware of their baseline because it feels normal. You wake up, move through your day, and react automatically to whatever circumstances arise. You might feel small frustrations, bursts of excitement, moments of anxiety, or fleeting happiness, but there is a dominant emotional current running beneath these surface waves. That current is your emotional baseline, and it is silently scripting your tomorrow. The frightening part is that if this baseline is rooted in fear, scarcity, or inadequacy, it doesn't matter how many affirmations you repeat or vision boards you create. The future you are trying to manifest will struggle to take form because it is being filtered through old, unhealed emotional patterns. Contrast this with a baseline that is consciously nurtured. When you inhabit a state of ease, gratitude, and trust, your emotional baseline becomes a fertile ground for reality to reflect abundance. This is not about ignoring challenges or pretending to feel good when you don't. It is about understanding that your baseline is like soil. If it is compacted, infertile, and dry, seeds of intention will fail to grow. If it is nurtured, rich, and receptive, your intentions will sprout naturally. The key is subtle, deliberate awareness. You must first notice the current emotional state you are unconsciously transmitting, then gently begin to guide it toward alignment. Even small shifts in your baseline, repeated consistently, ripple outward to create profound changes in your life. The paradox is that we often try to manifest externally what has not yet been created internally. We dream of success, love, or health, but our emotional baseline is still steeped in doubt, fear, or resistance. It's like attempting to grow a vibrant garden in barren soil. Your mind may know what you want, but your emotional system, the deeper, nonverbal, energetic core of your being, must first inhabit that reality before the external world can reflect it. This is why manifestation feels difficult, inconsistent, or even impossible at times. It is not the practice, the visualization, or the effort that is failing, it is the emotional foundation beneath it. Until you tend to this, the external results will always struggle to materialize in full. Take a moment to reflect. When you think about the life you desire, what do you feel? Is there a sense of possibility, curiosity, and expansion? Or is there tension, doubt, and a subtle resistance lurking beneath the surface? The answer to that question reveals your baseline. And here is the liberating truth. Your baseline is not fixed. It is not permanent. It can be reshaped, expanded, and recalibrated with awareness, intention, and practice. By becoming conscious of your emotional frequency, you gain the power to change the trajectory of your future, not through force but through resonance. The future begins now, not when you achieve some external goal, not when circumstances finally align, but in the quiet, ongoing emotional state you inhabit today. Your baseline is silently creating your tomorrow, and the moment you recognize it, you step into a place of profound empowerment. Your emotional baseline is more than just a fleeting feeling or a reaction to external events. It is the undercurrent of your inner world, the consistent emotional climate that shapes every thought, decision, and action. Most people think they are guided by conscious choice, by logic or intention, but in reality, the baseline acts like an invisible autopilot. It determines how you respond to challenges, how you interpret experiences, and ultimately the reality that forms around you. Understanding this baseline is the first crucial step toward conscious creation. Without it, you are like a ship sailing aimlessly in the ocean, buffeted by waves and winds you cannot control. But with awareness, you begin to chart a course, not by forcing the water to bend to your will, but by aligning with the natural currents that carry you toward the life you desire. Think of your baseline as the default emotional state you return to after every moment of excitement, stress, or inspiration. It is the place your mind and body naturally settle into, the emotional home you unconsciously inhabit. For some, this home is vibrant, expansive, and filled with curiosity and joy. For others, it may be confined by fear, anxiety, or self-doubt. This baseline develops gradually, shaped by early experiences, habitual thought patterns, and even cultural conditioning. It is reinforced every day through repeated emotional responses, subtle judgments, and unconscious assumptions about life and yourself. Importantly, the baseline is invisible. You rarely notice it because it feels normal, even if it is limiting your potential. Contrast helps to illuminate this more clearly. Consider two individuals. Both desire wealth, love, and fulfillment, yet one constantly operates from a baseline of scarcity and worry, while the other maintains a baseline of abundance and calm. The first person might visualize wealth or repeat affirmations, but their nervous system and emotional core are unconsciously broadcasting fear. Opportunities may come, but they are filtered through doubt and resistance, often slipping away or going unnoticed. The second person, however, does not need to force manifestation. Their baseline aligns them with opportunities naturally. Their perception, decisions, and even the people they attract reflect the vibrational frequency they have established. In this contrast, we see the profound influence of the baseline. It is not what you say you want that matters most, it is what your emotional system is habituated to feel. Your baseline also explains why emotional spikes, temporary highs or lows, do not guarantee results. A sudden surge of excitement, motivation, or inspiration is like a flash of lightning. It is powerful but fleeting. True creation requires a consistent emotional current, not occasional bursts. The baseline is the steady river beneath the turbulent surface of daily feelings. This river is what carries your intentions into reality. When the baseline is positive, aligned, and expansive, the flow of life becomes smoother. When it is negative, constricted, or fearful, even the most carefully planned intentions are slowed, distorted, or redirected. This is why many manifestation techniques fail. People attempt to bypass the baseline, treating thoughts and actions as the primary drivers, when in truth, the baseline determines the momentum behind every effort. So how is the baseline formed? It is the sum of repeated emotional experiences. From childhood conditioning to adult patterns, every recurring emotional state leaves an imprint. Trauma, fear, societal expectations, and unresolved emotional wounds create default states that can be subtle yet powerful. A person who learned that life is dangerous or unpredictable may have a baseline rooted in anxiety or caution. Someone conditioned to expect scarcity may habitually operate from lack, even if they have plenty externally. These patterns operate unconsciously, often outside of awareness, influencing decisions, relationships, and perceptions without the individual realizing it. Understanding this allows us to approach creation not by chasing goals, but by shifting the foundation on which our reality is built. Another important factor is emotional resilience. The baseline is not about perfection or constant happiness. It is about stability, coherence, and a sense of inner regulation. Someone with a resilient baseline may experience stress or disappointment, but they naturally return to balance more quickly. Their internal climate is fertile for creation. Conversely, someone with an unstable baseline may be thrown off by minor disruptions, prolonging negative emotions and perpetuating resistance. This contrast demonstrates that the baseline is not about eliminating challenge. It is about creating a stable emotional platform that allows life to respond to your alignment rather than your reactivity. Recognizing your baseline requires observation without judgment. Pay attention to how you respond when life does not go as planned, how you interpret ordinary events, and what emotional patterns repeat most frequently. Are you primarily anxious, worried, or doubtful? Or are you calm, open, and trusting? Awareness alone begins the process of transformation because you cannot change what you do not see. From this recognition, you can begin to consciously recalibrate your emotional baseline, not by forcing positive feelings or suppressing negative ones, but by gently guiding your inner state toward alignment. Practices like mindfulness, embodiment, emotional reflection, and subtle energy work help create this shift, reinforcing a new baseline over time. Even small adjustments, repeated consistently, ripple outward to influence your reality profoundly. The beauty of understanding your emotional baseline lies in the empowerment it brings. You realize that the external world is not the primary determinant of your life. Your internal state is. You are not merely reacting to circumstances. You are shaping them, moment by moment, through the emotional environment you inhabit. When you shift the baseline, the world responds. Opportunities that once seemed distant or impossible begin to appear naturally. Relationships, finances, health, and experiences start to reflect the internal transformation that has quietly taken place. This awareness reframes the journey from effort-based striving to consciousness-based alignment. Life is no longer about pushing against resistance but about nurturing a state that magnetizes your desires. Take a moment to reflect on your current emotional climate. Imagine the baseline you have carried unknowingly, day after day, month after month, year after year. What patterns do you see? Which states feel familiar and habitual, even if they are not serving you? Awareness is the first gentle step toward recalibration. The next step is intentional practice, cultivating thoughts, feelings, and habits that reinforce a more expansive baseline. The path is subtle yet immensely powerful. When you begin to understand and consciously guide your emotional baseline, you discover that the life you desire is not a distant goal but a natural extension of the emotional frequency you cultivate now. The invisible currents of your inner world are indeed writing tomorrow, and by tending them consciously, you step into a life of alignment, ease, and extraordinary possibility. The emotional baseline is not just a passive background state, it is an active force that collapses or expands the reality you experience. Every thought, action, or intention you have is filtered through this baseline, and the world responds accordingly. This is where the principle of resonance becomes undeniable. Life mirrors the dominant energy you hold within. It does not negotiate, plead, or compromise. Your baseline acts as a gravitational field, pulling toward you experiences, opportunities, and encounters that are in vibrational alignment. The challenge for most people is that this force is invisible, subtle, and often misunderstood. They attempt to manifest externally without addressing the internal field, and this is why so many techniques, visualizations, affirmations, vision boards, fail to produce lasting results. Without an aligned baseline, creation is like trying to build a house on shifting sand. Consider the contrast between two realities, one created unconsciously and one created with alignment. In the first, the individual may dream vividly of success, love, or health, yet their baseline is dominated by fear, doubt, or frustration. Opportunities may appear, but they slip away because the emotional field is not receptive. Their intentions clash with the weight of habitual emotions, and life seems to resist them at every turn. In the second reality, the same person has cultivated a baseline of calm, trust, and clarity. Their intentions no longer need to push against resistance. They flow naturally into manifestation. Life becomes responsive rather than reactive. The key difference between these realities is not effort, not knowledge, not action. It is the state of the emotional baseline. The world aligns with what you feel consistently, not what you occasionally wish for. Fear and alignment are the clearest example of this contrast. Fear, worry, and resistance shrink perception. They compress the field of possibility. When you operate from fear, your baseline signals scarcity, limitation, and struggle. Your perception narrows, your decisions are cautious, and opportunities are interpreted as threats or obstacles. Alignment, on the other hand, expands consciousness. Calm, joy, trust, and curiosity widen your internal field, allowing you to notice possibilities you would have otherwise missed. The universe does not respond to rationality or logic, it responds to the emotional frequency you inhabit. This is why a small shift in your baseline, replacing subtle tension with curiosity, doubt with openness, can have disproportionately large effects on your external reality. Synchronicity, the seemingly magical alignment of events, is a natural consequence of a coherent baseline. When your internal emotional state is harmonious, your perception is sharp, your intuition is clear, and the world appears to arrange itself in your favor. Opportunities show up just as needed, people appear who provide insight or support, and solutions manifest with apparent ease. This is not luck, it is resonance. Your emotional baseline is creating a magnetic field, and reality bends to that field with astonishing precision. Conversely, when your baseline is dissonant, efforts feel heavy, coincidences seem rare, and the world resists the very changes you are attempting to manifest. In essence, the baseline acts as both blueprint and filter. It shapes the architecture of your experiences and decides which elements pass through. Understanding this also illuminates why temporary emotional highs or intentional forcing of manifestation often fail. Motivation, excitement, or brief bursts of positivity are fleeting. They are sparks, not the steady flame required for transformation. Creation is not about moments of intense desire, It is about the persistent, underlying emotional frequency. This frequency, repeated day after day, moment after moment, forms the energetic foundation upon which your future is built. The baseline determines whether your intentions resonate or dissipate, whether opportunities are recognized or ignored, whether relationships flourish or stagnate. In other words, your future is less about what you do and more about who you are emotionally in every present moment. Resistance is another critical factor. Many people unknowingly maintain emotional patterns that contradict their desires. They want abundance but operate from scarcity, crave love but carry fear of rejection, or seek health but live with subtle self-criticism. This dissonance creates friction between intention and reality, and the world mirrors this friction with delays, obstacles, or apparent failures. The lesson here is profound. External effort cannot overcome internal misalignment. To truly expand reality, the internal baseline must first shift. The internal must be coherent, aligned, and expansive, and only then can the external manifest as a reflection of this inner state. Contrast framing helps here too. Effort versus ease, pushing versus receiving, trying versus allowing. Those who rely purely on action without alignment experience constant struggle. Life is a battlefield. Those who cultivate an aligned baseline move with life rather than against it. Life becomes a flow, effortless yet intentional. This is not passive surrender, it is active resonance. By consciously guiding the emotional baseline toward coherence, trust, and openness, you create a gravitational field that attracts aligned experiences. The world responds to the quality of your emotional signal, not the quantity of your effort. Once this principle is understood, manifestation is no longer a technique or a ritual. It becomes a natural consequence of emotional alignment. Even subtle emotional patterns matter. Small, repeated moments of tension, irritation, or anxiety accumulate, creating a baseline that may feel neutral, but is actually skewed toward limitation. Conversely, consistent moments of calm, gratitude, curiosity, and openness reinforce a baseline of expansion. Over time, this frequency becomes automatic, habitual, and deeply embodied. This is why the greatest creators, manifestors, and spiritual practitioners emphasize practices that cultivate emotional coherence. Meditation, energy work, reflection, breath work, and mindful presence. These practices do not force reality, they shape the baseline that naturally attracts it. The transformational truth is that your emotional baseline is the canvas upon which the universe paints your tomorrow. Fear and resistance create constraints, opportunities slip through unnoticed, and life feels heavy. Alignment and coherence create expansion, opportunities appear organically, and life feels effortless. This is not mystical speculation. It is a principle observed across psychology, quantum studies, and spiritual traditions. The internal state precedes external reality. Your baseline collapses or expands the possibilities around you, moment by moment, before your mind even chooses or your actions take form. By embracing this awareness, you step into a position of profound empowerment. The external world is no longer the unpredictable force that controls you. Instead, your inner emotional state becomes the anchor, the magnet, and the lens through which the future unfolds. Even challenges become navigable, not because circumstances change immediately, but because your perception, intuition, and resonance create pathways that were invisible before. This understanding shifts creation from struggle into flow, from effort into alignment, from hoping for change into being the change itself. Recalibrating your emotional baseline is not about forcing yourself to feel something you do not feel. It is not about pretending to be happy, confident, or abundant when deep down you feel the opposite. True recalibration is subtle, internal, and identity-based. It begins with awareness, the gentle recognition of the patterns you unconsciously maintain, the habitual emotional currents that have been shaping your reality without your consent. Only once you see these currents can you begin to consciously guide them, like a skilled navigator adjusting the rudder of a ship to align with the natural flow of the ocean. The process is less about pushing against resistance and more about cultivating resonance, allowing the baseline to naturally shift toward coherence, expansion, and alignment. The first step is observation. Spend time noticing the moments in your day when you feel tension, resistance, or subtle dissatisfaction. Notice how your body reacts, how your mind interprets events, and how quickly you return to habitual emotional states. This observation is not judgmental. It is neutral, like a scientist mapping the terrain of inner experience. Awareness alone begins to loosen the grip of old patterns because energy that is observed begins to move. You start to see the difference between temporary emotional spikes and the underlying baseline that quietly directs your life. This recognition is profoundly empowering. Once you can see it, you can change it. Next comes gentle emotional guidance. Rather than forcing yourself to feel good, begin by cultivating small moments of alignment, curiosity, and trust. These are seeds, tiny, consistent experiences that gradually expand the baseline. For example, when a challenge arises, instead of immediately reacting with fear or frustration, pause and take a few conscious breaths. Tune into a state of curiosity. What can I learn from this? What is possible here? This subtle shift, repeated consistently, signals to your nervous system that a new emotional home is possible, one that is expansive rather than constricted. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate, rewiring the emotional currents that have been directing your life unconsciously. Embodiment is the next layer of recalibration. It is not enough to intellectually understand your baseline, you must feel it in your body. Emotions are encoded in the nervous system, stored in posture, breathing patterns, and subtle muscular tensions. Practices like mindful movement, breath work, meditation, and gentle energy work help the body align with the new baseline. When your internal state is physically embodied, it becomes habitual and automatic. The universe does not perceive your intellectual understanding, it perceives the resonance of your entire being. By inhabiting this state fully, you begin to magnetize reality that reflects it naturally. Another key element is patience and consistency. Baseline recalibration is not instantaneous, it is cumulative. Just as a river carves a canyon over centuries, repeated emotional adjustments create lasting change. There will be moments when old patterns resurface, when fear, doubt, or resistance reappear. This is normal and part of the process. The difference is that you no longer fight against them or feel defeated, they become temporary fluctuations rather than permanent states. You learn to return to coherence gently, with trust rather than judgment. The baseline, like a muscle, strengthens through practice, repetition, and conscious alignment. Visualization and imagination serve as powerful tools, but with a key twist. They must align with the baseline rather than contradict it. Many people attempt to visualize extraordinary futures while their baseline remains rooted in fear or lack. This creates tension, subtle resistance, and ultimately slows manifestation. True alignment begins by first cultivating a baseline that naturally inhabits the energy of your desired reality. Then visualization becomes an effortless extension, a reflection of a state already established internally. It is no longer forcing reality to change. It is noticing how reality naturally begins to respond once the internal frequency has shifted. Integration is the final component. Recalibration is not a practice limited to meditation or quiet reflection. It is the emotional coherence you carry through your daily life. It shows up in conversations, decisions, work, relationships, and even mundane tasks. The baseline becomes the invisible framework that holds your reality, influencing how you interpret events, respond to challenges, and attract opportunities. As you integrate this state, you begin to notice synchronicities, effortless flow, and subtle shifts that confirm the recalibration is working. Your external reality begins to mirror the internal transformation with greater precision, consistency, and ease. Ultimately, recalibrating your baseline is about becoming the version of yourself that naturally receives. It is about inhabiting a state where trust, ease, and alignment feel normal, familiar, and sustainable. The old self, the one who pushed, struggled, or attempted to force manifestation, gives way to a new self that co-creates with life through resonance rather than resistance. This transformation is not only practical but deeply liberating. You no longer chase the future because you are already living it emotionally. Your baseline becomes the quiet, invisible magnet shaping tomorrow with certainty, elegance, and grace. As we come to the close of this exploration, it is essential to recognize the profound truth that your future is not something waiting to happen. It is continuously being created by the emotional state you inhabit right now. Every thought, every subtle feeling, and every habitual reaction acts like an invisible brushstroke on the canvas of tomorrow. The old way of thinking, believing that external circumstances dictate your reality, has kept countless seekers spinning in cycles of effort, struggle, and temporary victories. But when you understand that the baseline of your emotions is the true architect of experience, everything shifts. The realization is subtle yet transformative. You do not have to chase life. Life flows naturally to meet the state you consistently inhabit. Think of the contrast, the old self versus the new self. The old self was reactive, constantly pushed by circumstance, hoping that manifestation techniques, affirmations, or goals would force change from the outside. The new self, however, is anchored in emotional alignment, cultivating coherence and calm, allowing the universe to mirror the internal state. This is not about pretending or suppressing natural feelings. It is about guiding your baseline with awareness, intentionality, and patience. The old self struggled against resistance, while the new self moves with life, creating outcomes effortlessly through resonance. The difference is not minor, it is the difference between spinning in place and walking steadily toward an expansive, fulfilling reality. By now, you understand that recalibrating your emotional baseline is the single most powerful tool for shaping tomorrow. Small, consistent shifts in your internal state accumulate, rewiring habitual patterns and magnetizing experiences that align with your true desires. Each breath of awareness, each moment of emotional clarity, and each gentle practice of alignment strengthens the invisible gravitational field that draws opportunities, synchronicities, and abundance into your life. The universe does not respond to what you hope for or what you try to force. It responds to the emotional environment you provide. This is the quiet power of creation, subtle, steady, and profoundly effective. Take a moment to reflect on this. If your baseline becomes a state of trust, curiosity, and expansive calm, then tomorrow is no longer uncertain. It is familiar, predictable, and inviting. Challenges are no longer threats but opportunities to return to alignment. Doubts are no longer barriers but gentle signals to recalibrate. Every experience becomes a mirror of the internal state you consistently inhabit. You begin to notice the elegance of life's responses, the synchronicities that seem almost magical, and the effortless flow that accompanies true emotional coherence. The life you desire is not distant. It is already forming through the energy you cultivate in this very moment. As you move forward, remember that this is a journey, not a destination. Recalibrating your baseline is subtle, cumulative, and requires gentle attention, but it is deeply empowering. With awareness, embodiment, and intention, you can step into the version of yourself that naturally receives, that naturally resonates with abundance, love, and fulfillment. The invisible currents of your emotional state are writing tomorrow even as you listen, breathe, and feel today. By tending these currents consciously, you are no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You become the co-creator of your reality. And in that space, life flows with ease, clarity, and profound possibility, reflecting the emotional alignment you have so carefully cultivated.